Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Stop Searching, Start Finding, using your brain for file management. We have a really great webinar for you lined up today. We're going to be covering a lot of different options that you have as far as the different types of files that you manage for your business or personal life. The brain is a really great way of maintaining all of that structured information and giving you many different options on how you can access that info moving forward. So we're going to be covering files, web pages, emails, Dropbox, Google Drive, all those disparate information sources that are being thrown at you on a daily basis. The brain is a really great way to maintain and manage that info. People think of the brain as being a mind mapping tool. Some people refer to the brain as a note-taking application. It's all that and much more. So we're going to be sharing a lot of different examples for you today. The GoToMeeting question panel is open today, and my friends and colleagues Jay Ofemi and Chase Ingersoll are both answering your questions and moderating the question panel today. So feel free to answer or ask any type of question you'd like, and they'll get an answer back for you. And we'll select a couple of those in the QA at the end of the demo to share on screen our answers with you. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I just want to give you a really quick rundown, the basics of the Brain application in case you're completely new to the Brain. You can download a copy of the Brain at www.thebrain.com. You can download and create a free 30-day trial to use the Brain for 30 days, creating as many different Brain databases as you'd like. At the end of that 30 days, it's up to you to decide what type of license you may want to purchase. Carry on with the free version with more limited capabilities within the app, all the way up to licenses that allow you to sync onto multiple devices, even Team Brain, which allows multiple people to interact in the same Brain database. But after the 30-day trial, it's important to know you will still have access to all of the Brain databases that you have created. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I have a sample Brain open that I'll be using today. And as you can see, the Brain is divided up into two main areas. We have the Plex over on the left, and the Plex is a series of interconnected thoughts. Notice anytime I click on a thought, brings that thought into the center of the screen, displays all related information around it. Over on the right, we have the content area, and the content area can be any type of digital information, whether it's a note, a file, even a folder, an email, a link to a web page. So that's really where we're going to be focusing our efforts today, talking about all the disparate types of information that can be contained and associated with an individual thought. So first and foremost, what comes to mind when you think about files and data? Probably files, like filing cabinets, pieces of paper. That's how it all started. Pieces of paper were put into filing cabinets long before computers were around, and that is how information was stored and ordered. Then the computer came around, and what happened? Well, we ended up with more files, folders, filing cabinets. It was really the basic same structure or same premise of a filing cabinet, just simply digitized. Now, I used to keep a filing cabinet behind me, actually. It's long gone. It eventually, started off with paperwork maybe 20 years ago. Then it became just a storage location for all of my extra phone cords and computer equipment. And finally, even that got stored away and the filing cabinet is no more. So if I don't use a physical filing cabinet for all of my paperwork data, why would I want to do the same once I'm on the computer? So here I am in, as you can all see, a very simple file and folder structure. I've got an area for all of my clients that I can go into. So I'm managing all of my different client projects and responsibilities. And I'm looking for my one client in particular. And that client is Instant Dynamics, their communications client. and they are not there. So I'm going to jump back into clients and go into, they also fall under media and entertainment. There they are, Instant Dynamics Corporation. So lost a little bit of time going to the wrong location first. Technically, they fall into both categories. How does a file and folder represent that type of relationship? Now, sure, I could go back and create shortcuts. In fact, I know I have a shortcut. If I go all the way back to clients and go into clients that are up for renewal in 2021, there they are, Instant Dynamics. So I can open the folder that way. But once I get into the folder, I lose sight of those other relationships, of those other categories that my client, Instant Dynamics, falls into. And sometimes those are some pretty key pieces of information. So I have the exact same structure that you're looking at here in a file folder system mapped out in my brain for eSolutions Consulting, my company. And once again, I can go into the clients area and I've got my different categories, clients by industry. Now earlier, I clicked on communications first and didn't find what I was looking for. Here in the brain, I can click on communications. There's Instant Dynamics Corporation. And I'm now focused on this particular client. Notice as I clicked from thought to thought, every thought that I clicked on came into the center of the Plex, displayed all related information around it. So we have subcategories down below. Those are child thoughts. We have parents up above. So parents, active thought, and child thought down below. Sort of a hierarchical structure, but most importantly, I can still see all the different categories that Instant Dynamics is related to. And I can break away from a hierarchical structure by linking up to closely related topics, whether it's another company that Instant Dynamics is working with, or in this scenario, people that are working on this particular project or working with this particular company. So I've got further information that I simply can't display within a file and folder structure. All of those subcategories that Instant Dynamics is related to are visualized as parent thoughts up above. I can see their media and entertainment communications, regardless of which path I choose to click through my brain, I can still find that valuable information. And I can see they're up for renewal. They're a gold service level client, and we've had this client for 10 or more years. So by visualizing those categories, I'm given extra context about the subject matter that I'm currently focused on. Now, another feature that the brain has over a file and folder structure is the ability to actually define the relationships. So here we've got all the different active projects that I'm working on with this particular client. The Reach Out ad campaign, All for One, See the World. And here I've chosen to actually reference their launch date on the link that connects those two thoughts. I can double click on any link between two thoughts and define that relationship. Something that, I'll jump right back over to my file and folder structure, you simply cannot achieve that type of digital visualization of relationships with a file and folder structure. Why does Delta Corp fall into Instant Dynamics Corporation? Or what's this Reach Out? It's an ad campaign, I know, but I've got no further information. I'd have to open the ad campaign, open another document that shared information about when the contract was signed, when the due date is going to launch for this ad campaign, and so forth. So that information is sort of buried and lost in the file and folder structure, whereas I've chosen to make it simply front and center with the structure in the brain. So that is a few different examples of the benefits of just visualizing your information in the structure of the Plex over the structure of a file and folder system. Let's start talking about those documents and files now that we're bringing into the brain and the different ways that the brain can manage and handle that type of content that, once again, a file and folder system simply cannot provide. So for this example, I'm going to create a whole new thought. So I've got a new project that I'm working on with Instant Dynamics. So I'm going to click and drag off of the gate. Every thought in the brain that you create has 3 small gates. So there's the child gate down below, the jump gate over on the left, and the parent gate up above. And I'm just gonna pause for a moment to check my audio. Nope, audio is good right now. We had a couple of people write in that said audio jumped out. And once again, if anything goes wrong with the audio, hopefully we can type into, there's different options that you may have as far as calling into today's webinar or just listening over mic and speakers. If your resources are a little bit tight, it might be easier to just call in and listen. But regardless, sounds like audio is fine right now, so we'll move ahead. So once again, 3 small gates to create new links and new thoughts within your brain. And I'm going to create a new project thought down below. I'll just simply call this the 2021 relaunch. So I create my new thought, and with this 2021 relaunch, all of the digital information that I have that's going to be utilized for this particular project I'm working on is going to be linked to this thought. So I'll have Word documents, I'll have spreadsheets, I'll have notes, web pages, and so forth. Let's start with the note. First and foremost, the brain has a wonderful, wonderful feature, which is simply the Notes tab. And a note tab is associated, a separate note tab is associated with each individual thought within your brain. So you can see when I created this thought and navigated to it, I've got my notes tab appearing over on the right. I can simply start typing my details of the relaunch. A couple of features that I like about the notes. I won't take you through all the fundamentals of the notes toolbar, but I really, really love checkboxes to create sort of organized lists. So details, first I need to find the funding, and then approve with corporate, and then share with the team. And when something gets completed, I simply check that off the list. Also, if I need to reference when the date of approval ever came about, I can also click on the little icon here to add the current date and time on the calendar. And that button is customizable in your brain preferences as well. So you can always change this to a 24-hour clock or numbers only or whatever type of formatting you want for the date and time. So the great thing about the notes is the ease of creation with the notes. We actually utilize Markdown for formatting with our notes, and it makes it for very, very easy to add if I ever need to make something bold. If you're familiar with Markdown, I can just use a couple of characters. In this case, it's just 2 asterisks, which will make something go bold. If you're not familiar with Markdown, don't worry about it. Just simply use the buttons in the toolbar. And there is a little question mark icon that will teach you a little bit more about the different types of syntaxes that we use for Markdown if you really, really want to know more about it. But it makes it very, very easy to use and uniform throughout your brain using the Markdown tags for your formatting within the notes. But also one of the great things about the notes, when you create a long, detailed note for a particular thought, it's very easy to extract that information out of your brain. Now, obviously, it's a no-brainer. I can cut and paste this into an email or a document that I'm working on. But I can also click on the export button and view this in a browser. So in case I want to keep my note open while I navigate to another area of the brain, or even export to a PDF. I'm going to be, I've developed this really fantastic note, and here's my relaunched PDF that I'll keep out on my desktop. And this is obviously just some very basic content. But once I've really filled out a highly detailed note, and I'm sorry, it's launching over on my other monitor. There you can see I can just launch that PDF document that I've created that originated from text within my notes. So the notes are a really, really fantastic feature of the brain, probably my favorite feature of the brain application, and a great way to quickly get digital information into the brain that you're creating. Now let's move on to files and documents. So I'm going to start with creating new documents from scratch. Drag and drop into TheBrain is a simple process. There are a couple of different features that allow you to specify what happens with the file when you drag and drop. We'll get to those in a moment. Let's start with creating new documents. So let's say I'm going to have a new, for my 2020 relaunch, my introduction into the ideas that I'm presenting to the internal team members. So internal team and notice spell check appears there in the as I'm creating my new thought. Definitely helps me out. So I've created my new thought, internal team introduction, and this document doesn't exist yet. There's nothing to drag and drop into TheBrain. So I'm simply going to click on the plus tab and select from the list of available file types that I have. Now, TheBrain does its best to sort of review what's already installed on your operating system. It's not always accurate. Sometimes this list might not be populated. There's so many variables to operating system setups that TheBrain always can't find all of the different applications that may be available to you or that you use most often. So therefore, there are many different options to simply add your own templates. And this is a key component. If your operating system can open the file, then so can TheBrain. TheBrain doesn't decide how to open a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. It opens your default application for that file extension, for that file type. So in order to populate your list of available templates of files and documents that you can create from scratch within TheBrain, just simply click on More Actions and open up Template Help. Follow these on-screen instructions. I'm going to go ahead and open this directory. It's going to open a directory, and anything that you drop into that directory will show up for you as a template. So as you can see, I've got just a blank Word document. I've got a company letterhead. You can modify documents. You can have 10 different types of Word documents, some that are pre-filled out with company letterhead or fax cover sheets or whatever is most important to you. So drop those into that directory and they will populate then in your list. And I can simply click to launch a new, in this case, it's a blank Word document. Now the Word document inherits the name of the thought. So this Word document is internal team introduction.doc, and I can just say, here is my file. And I'll save this. And notice Word does not ask me where I want to save my file. This file is saved internally inside my Brain database. So I can always come back to this document at a later date. I simply click to launch it in its native application. Again, Word just asks the operating system to open this .docx file, and there it is in Word, and I can continue on with my edits. Another really great feature of TheBrain is the ability to create duplicates of individual files that are important. So let's say that's just sort of phase one of my internal introduction to this project. I've got the option of clicking on the plus and adding another document for phase two or step two or what have you. You can also right click on the thought and scroll down to duplicate thought. So I'm going to select duplicate thought, and this simply creates a new child thought with the exact same content. And it's duplicated. If there was information in the notes, that would be duplicated. I've got my document, and I can call this phase two. So I'll just click on the thought to rename the thought itself, phase two. So another feature that I use there from time to time, and just really makes things very, very easy for me to take existing documents, copy them, and reuse them or repurpose them. Another really great feature of TheBrain is the cross-linking that we saw earlier with the company. Think of that in terms of documents that are referenced by multiple organizations or have multiple team members that are working on it. This internal team introduction is really great for my 2020 team launch, but maybe I want to use this at my next marketing event, just to share with team members what's going on. So I'm going to click all the way back up to eSolutions and go down into marketing. And let's say if my marketing budget meeting is happening in 2021. So I'm planning my marketing budget meeting, and during this meeting, I want to share with everyone everything that we're doing for this new project for my company of Instant Dynamics. So I'm gonna click and link this to the thought that I just created, the 2021 relaunch. And there it is. You can see as I start typing it in, I'm met with all thoughts that contain whatever it is I've linked to so far. There's my 2021 relaunch. So I want to make sure that I reference this relaunch that we're getting really pumped up and excited about at my budget meeting that's happening in the future. And so that particular thought falls under multiple categories. It's a project that I'm working on with Instant Dynamics, and it's also a topic that I'm going to be discussing at my next 2021 marketing budget meeting. So cross-linking my thoughts as my brain continues to grow and evolve, again, is another great way to give me greater context of all of my data. So we've created our new project. We've got a new document and we've got some notes. Let's go ahead and start adding additional content. Now it's time to start talking about drag and drop, bringing existing data into the brain. So I happen to have a sample folder open over here on the left. Let me just get back to the right category. Under marketing, I've got some existing paperwork, some existing info that was created outside of the brain. I need to bring it into the brain to start keeping track of it. Drag and drop is really the easiest way to get many different types of data into your brain. So I've got existing Word documents, PDFs, and so forth. I simply want to click. This is my project breakdown. I'm just going to click and drag right into the brain. And let's talk about what happens when you drag and drop into the brain. So this was a Word document named Project Breakdown. I created a new thought simply called Project Breakdown. And this particular thought has an internal attachment, which is a copy of the original document. So dragging and dropping by default into the brain will create a copy of that file and store it internally inside your brain database. Now, that's the default setting, but that might not be what works best for your environment. No two environments are ever the same. Maybe you're working on a network and you've got access to the Z drive and other colleagues have access to the Z drive and everyone is updating information over on the Z drive. Therefore, you just want to create a link to that file and not move a copy because the copy won't get updated with the original. You certainly don't want to move the original in. No one else would have access. A copy would work best. There are keyboard shortcuts that you can use, or you can simply change the default setting within the Brain application. So let's start with the keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to grab this publisher notes and drag and drop this into the Brain as well. But before I release, I'm simply going to click on the Alt key. So the Alt key makes a shortcut rather than a copy of that file. Publisher notes, the new thought got created. And if I look at the details over in the content area, I can see where the full path of this file resides. So just simply held down the Alt key, did my drag and drop. If I want to move a file, here I'm going to grab my resource tracking Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to click and drag, and this time hold down the Shift key. And so that is going to move resource tracking. Notice it's no longer existing there in my folder over on the left. I have moved that file internally into the Brain. So keyboard shortcuts that can help you, or if you know for a fact you're always going to be moving data into the Brain, you can click on Options, Preferences. On a Mac, you would click on the Brain Preferences. And on the Behavior tab, you can specify how you want the brain to behave for drag and drop. Move, copy, or link, whatever works best for you. It's important to point out that if you are syncing your brain to the brain cloud, it's only going to sync internal file attachments. So in other words, if you're syncing your brain so that you can access your brain from your iPhone or your Android phone or from other computers that you have access to, internal attachments will get synced with the brain. A shortcut, you're only preserving the path to where that file exists. The file itself does not get synced up to the server when you sync the brain. So keep that in mind as when you make your decision as far as drag and drop, how you're going to bring your data into the brain. But also know that you can always go back, right-click on an internal attachment to select to move this file or copy this file out of the brain. If I go back to my shortcut, and here I can see this publisher notes has a little black arrow icon. That's referencing that it's a shortcut to that file. I can right-click to select move or copy this file into the brain. So you can always go back and make those adjustments if you've just made shortcuts to thoughts over time, but now you've committed to the brain and decided, yeah, this is where I'm going to store my data. So I have access to it from multiple devices. It's very, very easy to go in, find those shortcuts, and move those files internally into your brain database. So now we've got notes in our brain. We've created files from scratch. We've done some drag and drop with documents, whether it's creating shortcuts or internal attachments. Let's move on to web pages. It's very, very simple to get web data into the brain. It's one of my favorite features, having all of the important web data in my brain associated and linked with all the related pieces of information. So let's say our 2021 relaunch is going to also contain a web redesign. And I'm doing a little bit of research on this. So I've got some favorite web pages. I'm going to open up my web browser. And there it is. And simply drag and drop from my browser into the brain as well. So here I've got a web page that I really like. I like the graphics on this. It's very high tech and the background is changing a lot. My client is going to like that too. So I'm simply going to drag and drop from the address bar. Whether you use Chrome or Firefox or Safari, you can simply click and drag the icon in the address bar right into the brain, and you'll be able to very, very easily create links to related web pages. Now, if this is the web page then that we like, and this is going to be during our internal team introduction, we want to point out, oh, and this is what our web page is going to look like. I can connect those two. So I'm going to connect this to the web page. So notice I'm clicking and dragging all the way down to the past thought list where I recently activated this thought. And I've simply linked those two web pages. So I've got access to my notes, my files, even web pages that I'm going to be referencing during this internal meeting for a big presentation. So it's a really, really great feature of the brain, being able to bring these web pages into the brain in addition to all the files and documents that you're bringing in as well. So let's talk about another way then to bring in web content into the brain. Now that's a very basic process, drag and drop. You find the web page you like, you simply drag and drop it right into the brain. Sometimes we don't always have the open, or maybe that particular brain is accessible and we find another web page that we like, or we run into some key information that's important to us. We want to save this for a later date. This web page has, okay, not sure why that's not loading up. We'll just refresh that. So anyhow, it's that web page isn't looking good for us, so I've got another example. Here we go. So we've got a cool web page. Maybe we really like the graphics on this particular web page. I want to bring this into my brain, but remember, I don't have my brain open, or even if I do, I'm not in the right area. I'm not on the right thought, and I'm in a hurry. I need to catch a plane, or I'm running out the door. How do I preserve this information? Well, the brain has a series of different bookmarklets or extensions, depending on, different browsers refer to them in different ways. And you can find them on our website if you go to the Brain Box page. The Brain Box is a great way to collect and retain important information into your brain that can be cataloged and categorized at a later date. So this is a really, really fantastic way to make your brain simply collect all the data that's coming at you, and when you have time at your own convenience, decide what you want to do with that data. So I'm simply, with this particular web page open for Google Chrome, I have the extension installed for BrainBox. If you go to the Google Chrome, I think they call it the extension store, you'll find the BrainBox link there. It's also linked from our web page. And I can simply click the button to add this into the BrainBox. And hopefully that you saw that. It came up very quickly. It just scanned it and said added to BrainBox. I know it's waiting for me in my BrainBox. So it's a really, really great way. I'm going to go ahead and add this one as well, just so you can see a couple of different items being added into the BrainBox. A great way to quickly and easily capture information. You can do that with files as well. The process is a little bit different between Windows and Mac. I'm on a Windows machine today. I find a file I like, this MP4 file. I want to use this in one of my presentations. I'm going to right click on the individual file, and I'm going to select Send to BrainBox. Now, to send a file in Windows to BrainBox, there's no extension that needs to be added. You simply install the Brain. With a web browser, there is the extension that needs to be installed. And if you're on a Mac, the process is just a little bit different. Again, nothing that needs to be installed for individual files, but you would simply click and drag the file down to the Brain icon on your dock. So it's a little bit of a different process, still works the same. It adds the file into your BrainBox. Now, let's return back to Brain. And I go to my web redesign and I recall, yes, earlier today, I found some web pages that I really like and I want to reference those with my client at my upcoming meeting. I added them to my BrainBox. So I like to click on the little BrainBox icon in the upper right. And as you can see right at the top, there's my Ishitani furniture. That was the first web page I added. There's my Rogue Zephyrus, and there's my MP4 file that I sent into my BrainBox. Even without the Brain open, or rather without the, being in the right area of my Brain, I've added it in, and now I can preview this, so I can launch this in a web browser and just verify, is that the web page I like? Yes, it certainly is. And so I'm going to click on the little plus tab or plus button. It's going to add that, take it out of the BrainBox and add it as a new child thought under the web design. So BrainBox is a really, really great way to capture your data when you're on the go. Let's talk a little bit more now about some other disparate information sources. Since we're talking about files and web content coming into the Brain, many times you are now storing your files on the Brain, and if you're not, other people are, and they're sending you links to their files that they have in their online file resource applications. And of course, I'm referring now to applications such as Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive. A lot of different options exist for us out there, and different people use different applications. All of those can be incorporated into your Brain, even if you don't use them. From time to time, I'll receive a file from a client, and it's just a link to a video that's online or a document that's stored in their online file storage service, and they've simply given me access. So I don't even use Dropbox or Google Drive, but how do I manage this information, receive it, keep track of it, and so forth? Well, luckily, most of these applications have URLs associated with them. We'll get to that in just a moment. Let's first talk about Dropbox. It has both a URL and a local version if it's your Dropbox account. So I've got another folder open right now, and it actually is my sample Dropbox directory. So everything that goes into this folder is reflected in my Dropbox account and is available to me online as well. Because I've got a local copy and an online copy, there are many different options of what I can bring into the brain. Now, once again, if I just click and drag, so I'm going to grab this pricing chart and I simply drag and drop right into the brain, it is going to follow the typical behavior of the brain. Since I did not change the setting, it created a new thought, and that thought has a copy of that document internally in my brain database. So the directory for Dropbox behaves just like any other file directory. Dragging and dropping into the brain follows the process that you've assigned to the drag and drop setting. But because it's Dropbox, there's a few different options. I can also right click on any file in this directory because it's my Dropbox. I can copy the Dropbox link. So if I just want to have access in my brain to a file that's out on Dropbox, if I know the URL, I can copy and paste the URL into the brain. Here I'm grabbing the URL from my local Dropbox directory, so I'll copy that now and into the brain. And again, I'm still putting this under web redesign. I'm just sharing with you the different features. My computer is notifying me that I copied a link, a web link, and there it just simply names the thought Dropbox. But when I mouse over, you can see it's called the pricing chart. So that was the name of the document. And because I am logged into Dropbox, it's loading up right there in my, so there's my pricing chart. And it can even continue navigating. So because it's a URL, it's opening up in the Brain's built-in browser. So any web-based content is going to load up right here in the content area. So there's my full Dropbox that's online available to me, and I'm viewing that in the content area of my brain. So think of that in terms of if you don't use Dropbox, but someone sends you a file, oh, you need to review the pricing outline for 2021, here's the link. Save that link in your brain. They've shared it with you, so you'll always be able to access that, that public link. You can share that right in the brain. And that URL can be acquired in many different ways. Again, from your local directory, if it's your file or if it's been sent to you by someone else. Let's go ahead and look at an online example. I also have another web page open, and that's Google Drive. So Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, they all sort of work the same. Many times there's a local directory that's being reflected online. Every individual file or folder has its own URL. So here I am in my online Google Drive. These are just some sample documents that I have, but of course I can scroll down. It's moving a little slow for me, Google Drive is, but I can simply, I'll click to open, but notice any file that I open in Google Drive, it updates the URL. And because it has a unique URL, I can simply drag and drop that into the brain, copy and paste, but that information, that URL can be saved in the brain very easily. So my Google Drive is not behaving. It's kind of, that window's lagging for me. So I can't show you the online URL. Maybe it's just that document. No, Google Drive is not playing nicely. So that'll update in just a moment. I'll have a URL, and again, I can simply drag and drop into the brain. And then maybe I won't have that problem with the browser not loading up the content window because Google Drive is moving so slow. And let's talk about one more, just because it comes up so often. I think I'm probably just heading this one off. Anytime I share Google Drive and OneDrive, people always ask about Evernote as well. Very popular. Can Evernote content come into the brain? It certainly can. Now, Evernote, I do have a simple Evernote account, so I'm going to open that up. Evernote, they've changed their, how do you say this? They've changed their algorithm a couple of times. So it used to be that we could only copy and paste into the notes area because the URL you would copy is sort of a double URL. Anyhow, they've recently changed it, and here's how it works. So you can see I've just got some sample screenshots and documents here, but let's say the Cedar Rapids on-site visit. I need to copy this and get a link into my brain. If I right click on an item in Evernote, I can scroll down to, now it says copy internal link. We have no control over this. It's not really an internal link. That link is going to point to the cloud version of that particular item in Evernote. So I copy the internal link. I've got that link on my clipboard. I come into the brain, right click, paste web link. It's actually going to take me online. I'm not sure why they call it an internal link, but it is what it is. And this is loading up Evernote. Now I'm not logged in. I can log in from the brain, or I can launch this in my web browser where I think I am logged in. No, I'm not logged in yet. So I just simply need to log in to my Evernote account to access that file, but I can always access it here from the brain as well. Now, the very final component that I wanted to share with you today, we've brought so many different disparate information sources in, as we said we would. We've got individual files, checklists, our own private or personal, thought by thought notes in the brain, created documents from scratch, brought existing documents in. Now we're linking to web content that is available online, whether it's an online file or an online website. Actually, two more things I want to share with you: email and importing. Now, there are many different importing options that you have, and we could have an entire 1-hour webinar reviewing each individual import type. But since today is all about files and folders, I'm going to go ahead and import a folder into the brain. So I'm going to click on File and select Import. And here are all the different import capabilities. A properly formatted text file, an Excel spreadsheet can actually be imported. I am actually going to go down to import a folder. I'll select the folder. And if I go into my desktop 2, which is where I have my marketing directory, let's try this one more time. So my add 21, that's what I want to import. I'll say OK. And now, before I click on the import button, I can either create this as a new brain or import it into my existing brain. That is exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to select that option and import. And all of that information is being imported into my brain. Folders are becoming thoughts, and any attachment or file within that folder is added as an attachment. So add 21 with 2 subdirectories, expenses and research. Here's add 21 with 2 subdirectories, expenses and research. So it reflects all of that information visually for you in the brain's interface. So that's one of the different import options you have to really populate a brain very, very quickly. So I noticed that we're coming up right, we got about 10 minutes before the end of the hour. I've shared with you many, many different options today of bringing notes, files, documents, folders, web content, online web documentation, even emails, all directly into the brain from many, many different disparate information sources. Now that I've brought all of this into my brain, I can sync it to the cloud for online access and even access from mobile devices. So I get to all this data that's now in my brain from my iPhone or my Android device. So what we're going to do now is shift over into questions, and I believe Jay and Chase have a couple of key questions for me. So let's start right in. Jay says the first question that came up that he'd like me to demo is, what will happen to a file that was linked to in the brain and then the file was moved or deleted? So if you simply linked to a file in the brain, and then you went back to that original file and moved it or deleted it, the thought would still be there in the brain and it still retains the original path. If I go all the way back to a recently modified thought that I've added, well, I think I can explain it just as easily as demoing this. You'll simply get a message that says that the file cannot be found. So it doesn't delete, and sometimes people simply want a link from one that works from one computer. What happens when they open that brain if they sync to the cloud and they open it from their MacBook, well, C:// my documents doesn't even make any sense for a file path on a MacBook. So the link simply doesn't work. The brain doesn't delete it, but the brain also doesn't update it. It's up to you if you want to retain that information. And of course, this brings me to a good example. I can always run a report in my brain. So you can see this brain has 1,203 thoughts in it, but I want the brain to show me all thoughts that have attachments that are external. So I want to review, I've got 40 thoughts in this brain with external attachments, which mean when I sync it to the cloud and access it from another device, these 40 documents will not be available on that other machine. So that's running a report to sort of review the data that I've added into my brain. I can review these thought by thought and decide, well, I've got access here from this machine. Do I want to have access from other machines? So many different options for you as far as reviewing that content. And what would happen if the file isn't there? You simply get that warning message. The next question, closely related, if you attach a file internally to the brain and sync, will it be available on other devices? So yes, it certainly will. And that's really, really important to point out. So I attach a Word document to my brain, I sync it to the cloud. I've got access online from, I can download from another machine where I'm logging in and looking at my brain online. I can download that Word document. Or the brain itself, if I'm syncing between multiple devices, that Word document is available on each device. Now it's up to you to have an application that can open a .doc file on every device. So in other words, if I install some kind of random application that stores everything as .abc files here on my Windows machine, I sync it to the cloud and I download that brain on my MacBook. Does my MacBook have an application that can open a .abc file? The file is there, but it's up to me to determine how I can access or open that file once I've synced it to the brain and then thus to another machine. And then a couple more quick questions. So great, we've got quite a few that came in. How to link to brains? Oh, that's a really, really great question. So let's spend a little bit of time with this. Yes, it's very, very easy. And here I'm just going to adjust the layout and display of brain. Very easy to link two brains to one another, and a couple of different ways to do it as well. I have a feeling the question is referencing just from brain A, how do I get to a specific thought in brain B? And that is simply done with each individual thought's local URL. So because this brain syncs to the cloud, when I right-click on a thought, you can see I've got a local URL and a web thought URL. So I've got a link to the online location of this thought or to my local copy of this thought. So I'm gonna copy local thought URL. And now let's go ahead and let's just create a new brain. I'm gonna click on File and Create Brain. And here is my new brain, is the name of my brain. Anytime you create a new brain database, it's gonna randomly select a different theme or wallpaper. So there, just picked a very clean light blue theme. But now that I've got this new brain, I can have an area to common brain links. So a quick little jumping point to other thoughts that I'm accessing frequently in other brains. Remember, I still have that local thought URL on my clipboard, so I can right click, paste web link, and notice I'm going to close my eSolutions tab so that I just have the here is my new brain open. And the brain follows the same rule always. Anytime you launch a file attachment from a thought that's associated with, or from a file that's associated with a thought, you launch a file attachment, it's going to open in its native application. So this is a brain link. It's going to open the brain, which is already open, but it's going to create a new tab for me and take me directly to the 2021 relaunch thought. So, and even from this thought, I could make a child thought that takes me into my, here's my new brain thought. I know several longtime brain users that have multiple smaller topic specific brains, and then they've got one master brain that sort of links off to branches and key different brain databases that they use. So very, very useful feature. And the next question that came up is ways to get stuff out of the brain. Can you export? Yes, you certainly can export out of the brain. Well, we saw how we export a note. So we started small, just took a small note, click on the button in the notes toolbar, and export to a PDF. We can export groups of thoughts, or we can export the entire brain. This is a very large brain, if you recall. There was over 1,000 thoughts. So let's say I just want to export a tiny portion of this brain. And for this example, I just want an outline of what's going on with my 2021 research. And so I'm going to control click on 2021 research. It adds that thought into my selection box. And I'm going to build up my selection box with groupings of other thoughts that'll be included in my export. Now, I could do that manually by control clicking thought by thought. Notice every thought that I control click on adds a thought. It adds that thought into the selection box, or I can control click to remove. In this case, I'm going to click on edit and go down to select related thoughts. So this allows you to sort of decide, all right, every child thought, I'll stay with that, every child thought we'll really bump that up for 8 generations. So anything 8 links below my 2021 relaunch thought will now be added into the selection box. So I've got 21 thoughts in there. Now that I've added these to the selection box, I can export them. How do I export them? Well, I could copy them and export them into another brain. I just right click and copy thoughts, go over to another thought and paste them in. In this case, I mentioned a text outline, so I'm going to copy as text outline. So I've got that on my clipboard. I'm going to leave this open because I'm going to do another export type in just a moment. And let me just open up some kind of text editor. I use Notepad++. That's opening up right over here. Bring that onto the screen. Come on now, there we go. No, it is not traveling. There we go. So I've got Notepad++, any text editor, Word, Excel spreadsheets, whatever you'd like, right click and paste. So I've exported an outline of that thought structure. This is really great for the outline of a book you're reading, for a class you're developing and creating in your brain, or you need to take all the information you've put together for a customer and share that with your team or your boss. So a text export, an outline of all those individual thoughts in text format. And it retains the relationships, the structural relationships. So all child thoughts are indented. 1, grandchildren 2, as you can see under graphics, there was add 21, expenses, Gmail, and so forth. So I went a little bit deeper in that area. So that's a text export of my data. Let's go ahead and try one more feature, which is to click on File, Export. And here I can actually export this to folders. There's the text export. I can do it this way as well. JSON is a little more technical. I'll get to that in a moment, but I can export this to a folder structure. Again, a thought becomes a folder. Any file attachments within that were associated with that thought would be file attachments within the folder. You can actually export your entire brain. So that's the default setting. I can also say export just what I've selected in the selection box, but you can also export your entire brain to a file and folder structure, or your entire brain to JSON. JSON retains everything. If you know what JSON is, that coding language, you'll realize how powerful that particular feature is. I probably can't explain to you what JSON is. You'd have to go to college to figure that out and get a degree in computer engineering. So JSON actually captures everything, all the thought relationships, all the link types, link notes, thought types, tags, and so forth, the advanced features of the brain. It's your entire brain all that data in JSON. So if you're familiar with JSON, you'll know it's a very, very powerful export option. So many different ways to export your brain. Hopefully you'll find some of those that are interesting or important to you. And if you do want to know more about exporting to JSON, send a note into support@thebrain.com. We can give you a little bit more information on sort of the data structure that you end up with. And then one last question that Jay said he wanted me to really squeak in. Can you quickly cover finding information in the brain using search, reports, and so forth? Absolutely. So one more time, you saw earlier that I, ran a report in my brain. Let's take a closer look at that process. Little button that I use right next to the search box to open the reports. You can also click on View Report. Running reports on data in your brain is a pro feature of the application. There are a lot of different ways to filter your reports. So by default, I'm viewing all thoughts of all different thought types and tagged with different tags. There are 1,203 thoughts in this brain. But I can filter this report. I want to find all forgotten thoughts. Forgetting a thought is really like throwing something in the recycle bin before you actually throw it in the trash. So when I right-click on a thought, project breakdown, I clicked on it. I'm going to right-click and select to forget. So it looks like it's no longer there in the brain, but over in my reports, I can say, show me my forgotten thoughts. And I've got quite a few. This is a sample brain that I kick around quite a bit. But if I scroll down to project, there it is, project breakdown. So there it's still in the brain. I can now decide to right-click and remember or permanently delete this thought. So a lot of different ways that you can filter within the reports. I can find, once again, all thought attachments that contain .docx and refresh. So these are modern .doc files. There are 28 of them. Let's find all the .doc files that have been modified within the past, looks like month, and it comes down to just 6 files. So a lot of different ways that you can filter out and run sort of queries against the data within your brain there in the reports area. And then of course there is the search. Let's go ahead and close reports and talk really quickly about search. The information that's going into your brain is being indexed by your operating system. So that means Spotlight on a Mac and Windows Desktop Search on a Windows machine, all being indexed by your operating system, which makes the brain's search results very accurate and very fast, responsive, and light for the application. So if I do a search for the word power, if I spell it right, I'm instantly brought with these search results of all of the thoughts that contain the word power. These are also including links and events. We didn't even talk about the calendar built within the brain today, but it does have a built-in timeline that can be integrated or synchronized with your Google Calendar. So I can click to go to any one of those particular thoughts. If that's not the thought that I was looking for, I'll click on the search field and I'm brought to my most recently activated search. And I'll scroll down and my second grouping of thoughts are all of the notes and internal attachments that contain the word power. So if the power is in the note or power is within the text of the document itself, you can see I've got 45 matches. So I've got quite a few internal thoughts. No external, that would be the next grouping. If I had an external, in other words, a shortcut to a file, that gets also indexed and would show up in your search results. So a very, very, really fantastic way to integrate our search with your operating search's indexing to make sure that it's very accurate. And finally, the last closely related component that really comes in handy is to click on recent changes within the brain. This feature is really great in a team brain environment, but it can be handy for individuals as well. So these are all the thoughts that were recently modified today. There's quite a few, 128 changes in the last 7 days. So every individual thought or file attachment or note or change that you make is being tracked and cataloged within the brain. So every thought has a thought history. You can find out when modifications were created, when files and attachments were added, when changes were made, and so forth. And that's on the recent changes there, or on the individual thought. So you can see I can mouse over a thought. I added an attachment to new thought today at 1:48, or I can go to an individual thought, and I'll go all the way back to, if I navigate up to my web redesign, not gonna be a long thought history there, but I bet if I click on instant dynamics, I can right click, or just click rather, and click on the thought history for that individual thought. So I can find all of the changes that have been happening on a thought by thought basis throughout every thought within my brain, when attachments were added and so forth. And so finally, one last component is to share with you that today's webinar was being recorded. So if you missed anything, if you had to step away, if you want to recap how Outlook integration works within the brain, or how can I bring in my Excel spreadsheets or import data into the brain, feel free to follow the link. You'll receive a thank you email coming to you from joining the webinar today. Feel free to follow that link and watch a recording at your own pace of today's webinar. And also, you know, we threw a lot of information out there today. If you're new to the brain, we teach a class every Friday called The Brain 101. The class sizes are typically smaller. We had well over 400 signups for today's webinar. So Jay and Chase both had their hands full with questions today. If we didn't get to your question, or you want to really take it thought by thought, step by step on how to create a new brain from scratch, or just cover the basics, please join us for a Brain 101 call. Every Friday we hold those classes, and I can go through all the questions in those smaller class sizes and make sure that each question gets addressed. And finally, we're always available for you at support@thebrain.com. Happy to hear from you, happy to answer any additional questions that you may have, whether you're a long-time Team Brain group with some questions, or just a first-time user using the free version of the software. We're going to answer your questions and help you out in any way we possibly can at support@thebrain.com. So thanks everyone for joining me today. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And as always, enjoy your brain. Thanks everyone. Bye.